Okay, it's 7:01. I am going to call the meeting of the Winona County Planning Commission to order, and we will start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic
for which
which
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty
justice for all.
for all.
All right, at this time, is everybody in agreement on the agenda? If they are, would someone make a motion?
So moved.
Mark Clark
second.
has moved
Yep.
that we approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Vince or Pat?
Pat.
Okay, Pat has seconded the agenda motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Then we have, the next item is approval of the minutes for the May 21st, 2000 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to read them over? Is there any
Yes.
questions, additions, or corrections?
I'll move approval, Steve Jacob.
Steve Jacob has moved for approval of the minutes. Is there a second?
I second.
I second. Lynn Carlson.
All right, Lynn Carlson has seconded. Is there any discussion on a motion to approve the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes are approved as written for the May 21st, 2020 meeting. All right, at this time, we go into the petitions. Docket 6-18-2001 to consider the petition of Brett and Laura Flathers for a conditional interim use permit in regards to the following. Eric, are you the staff person?
Yes. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you really good right over the petition.
That's right. I can reach out and high five you, can't I?
Well, you better be careful about that, Eric.
Okay, well, I'm going to start in your packet on page 15. And I hope everybody read the material, but just to touch on a few things in the staff report. This petition, as well as the next one, is in section 28 of Warren Township at the property located on Almond Drive, section 28. And in this particular petition, they wish to build a new house. So this is a conditional use permit request to allow a new single-family dwelling on less than 40 acres. In this case, it's an existing 4.76 acre parcel. There's an existing shed, 30 by 120, that's located on the parcel. They believe that was constructed in 2010, 2011. And then they also live on an adjacent parcel across or north of Almond Drive where they reside currently. And on this parcel on which they wish to build a new house, the existing shed is located, and they wish to construct a new house just south of that structure. They've owned the parcel since 1992, and it has been planted into trees and grass since at least the early 90s. It has not been in tillage. The comprehensive land use plan considers that parcel long-term agricultural uses. The applicants have submitted a letter that is in the packet that talks about some of the notes that's associated with it. In addition, the next petition will deal solely with the issue of erecting 3 radio tower antennas. Township acknowledgement form was received for this. The Warren Township Board has indicated support, provided that it does not compromise or restrict or affect adjacent agricultural practices. Staff has included the breakdown as far as the type of acreage according to the tax record system. Essentially, it has been developed with the existing shed that's been located with it. There has been some questions that have been directed to the Highway Department. Currently, the proposed new building site is served by a township road access coming in from the north. The applicants propose to extending a new driveway out to the southeast connecting to Winona County Road 29. In order to do that, they will have to apply to the county highway engineer for that drive access.
29 or 25?
It's 25.
Or 25. 25. Yep. Sorry about that.
I have that page of the PowerPoint up for you, Eric.
Okay, well, let's skip to the PowerPoint. Let's jump ahead to page 33. Again, the petitioner seeks conditional use permit to allow a new dwelling on less than 40. The request is pursuant to 10.4.636 of the zoning ordinance. That's the agricultural district that allows that. And Chapter 5.5.42 are the findings that would have to be made in this request. Page 34. The aerial imagery shows essentially the nature of the 4.7 acre parcel, and they wish to construct that new house south of that existing building. Again, even just from the aerial imagery, the site is planted with trees and vegetation and has not been in agricultural row production for at least the last 15 years. Page 35. The slide includes petitioner's statements. 2, cottage design of the house was created to blend into the rural setting. Size of house is well proportioned to be nestled into the surrounding trees and landscape. 3, the house will be on 4.5 acres of wooded land. House's location was selected for the natural runoff and drainage. Neither will be obstructed. Page 36. Again, the Warren Township acknowledgement form has been received, and the township has indicated support with strong emphasis or added comment that the building project cannot restrict the adjacent agricultural practices. And that signed form is in the packet and signed by Chairman Everett Rolfing, dated May 4th, 2020. Page 37. Just a couple of picture slides. The picture that you see is taken from Almond Drive and kind of looking in a southwest manner from the Township Road. The white building on the left is the Warren Township Hall. The longer red lineal building is the petitioner's existing building that they have on that parcel. Page 38. This picture is taken south or behind the existing shed, and that's looking now back at the southeast towards County Road 25. It's behind the shed, and in that view, that would be the driveway would be meandering off into the southeast to connect back to the County Road 25 according to their proposed site plan. Page 39. This is looking east from behind the shed. Kind of show the mature trees that have grown in that part of the parcel. And I guess with that, I will turn it over to the chair unless you have some questions I can answer.
Does anyone have any questions for Eric?
This is Mark. We have to do each one of these separate. We can't put both of them together because they're separate issues, obviously. But
Correct. Yep. There's been 2 separate staff reports and
okay,
findings.
so we have
and
to
they're
go
different
through all of
chapters the
them.
ordinance.
Okay.
Yep. So they each have to be taken on their own.
Does it make any, Eric, this is Gene Hansen. Does it make any difference, the occupant of the house just west of this parcel? Did they have any comments, or I take it they were notified?
Correct. We did receive a few calls and questions from neighbors, but no formal comments were received from any of the neighbors.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the commission members?
This is Vince. Eric, I might have missed it. What was the last picture? It shows a ladder on a structure there. Is there some construction going on now?
No, that was just the immediate southern part of the existing shed.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you, Eric. At this time, does somebody representing Brett and Laura Flathers wish to make comments? Please state your name, address, and tell us as a petitioner what you want us to hear. It's not coming in on my audio.
I sent him a chat message asking him Mr. Chair.
Well, I get a phone on my screen, but I hear nothing. Council, what do we do now?
Unless we know that they want to make a presentation, I'm not hearing that there's anyone that's here to make a presentation, so you can move on. Kay, do you know if they were intending to speak on behalf of the petition
I
today?
believe they're listed on the screen here as being on by phone, and the phone thing comes on my screen, but it isn't coming out.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
it's Kay. At 6:47, I sent him a chat that said, "Hi, Brett. After staff does a presentation, you have a time all to yourselves to explain what you want to do, and the chair will call upon you. You have as much time as you need then." And I did not get a reply to that. So
Well, it keeps flashing a phone receiver on my screen, but it's obviously not being picked up.
Eric, any thoughts?
Would it be okay for us to just move ahead with opening the public hearing? And if we run across a stumbling block, then we might have to work to get a hold of the petitioners, but if everything goes.
Hello?
Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Hello.
Hi, Eugene, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you finally now. State
Yeah,
your
we
name
dialed
and
in with a
address
different-
and say what you have to say.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Thank you for letting us have this opportunity. My name is Brett Blathers. My address is 24478 Almond Drive, Lewiston, Minnesota. So I guess, you know, it was covered pretty well by Eric, what we were asking in this petition. And I guess I would just ask anybody if they have any questions of me, if I could answer them for them. So.
Mr. Chairman, this is Patrick. I have a question.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Mr. Blathers, I was just curious about if you had any communication or what your thoughts are about tying into the emergency services for Winona County. I know this is the next docket number, but with the towers to help out with emergencies and that type of thing, have you given that any thought?
This is Stephanie with the county attorney's office. We should restrict the discussion at this point and questions to this petition and hold off on that till the next petition.
Okay, thank you, Council.
Okay.
Anybody else with a question? Okay, thanks, Brett and Laura, and we will keep on with your, if we have further questions later, we may have to try and get back to you, but for right now, I think that it's appropriate for the Planning Commission to open the public hearing. I need a motion though.
So move.
Second.
Who was that?
Patrick.
All right, Patrick moved to open the public hearing for docket 6-18-20-01. Is there a second to this?
Mark
Mark
seconded.
seconds it. Okay. Any further discussion on opening the public hearing? Hearing none, all those in favor of opening the public hearing on docket 01 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now open. Would anyone wishing to speak to this subject, docket 01, please state your name and address and say what you have to say. Now, there is a phone receiver on my screen, so if somebody's behind that, please talk. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak at the public hearing on docket number 01, please state your name and address and say what you have to say. For the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak to docket 6-18-20-01, please state your name and address and say your piece. Seeing no activity, would someone make a motion
I move
to
we
close the public hearing?
I move we close the public hearing. This is Vince.
Vince moves to close the public hearing on docket 01. Anyone second it?
Second, Patrick.
Patrick seconds it. Is there any discussion on closing the public hearing motion? Here, go ahead. Hearing none, all those in favor of closing the public hearing for docket 6-18-20-01 say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion to close the public hearing on docket 01 is approved. At this time, is there any questions of anyone on the Planning Commission, of anybody, or any discussion of docket number 01?
Eugene,
Yeah,
I don't know if it's a point that's relevant or not, but I'm curious. whether or not Mr. Flowers knows that we just recently approved a new radio tower for that same area. I don't think it complicates what he's doing with his ham radio, but last month, didn't we approve a new communications tower in close proximity for that?
Cell tower.
Can somebody address this point?
That's probably 4 or 5 miles away. Be my guess, probably around 5 miles away
Okay.
on
And
the other side of Lewiston.
Mr. Chair, as before, we should limit our discussion on this to the
Oh,
housing on less than
housing.
40 acres.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you, council. Any other discussion? Okay, let's go to the findings of fact. Who's got the page for that? Eric, can you help me out?
That would be right after the staff report.
I'll do it.
In my,
Oh,
in
here,
my
I
packet.
found it, I found it.
Stephanie's
Page
got it.
28. All right, to conserve time, I'll read the findings of fact by number. If anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, jump right in. Otherwise, we'll go to the next one. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. And I guess at this time, I will iterate. We've already talked about this several times because there's been trees on this land for 15 years. And I can attest to the truth of that. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 9. Number 10. Number 11. Okay. Is there any discussion on any of the 11 findings of fact? Seeing no sign of activity, let's go to the following conditions. Number 1. Number 2. I guess I have a question of Eric. Has the Winona County Highway Department been notified about this, or is that up to the property owner upon completion of the CUP process?
Yes, the highway department has been alerted of this, and I believe the petitioners have already contacted them. It's the practice of the highway department not to issue a permit until they are finished or complete going through permitting with the planning and zoning department. Sometimes there is a concern issuing a second driveway to a county road when there's already an existing one. But what is different in this case is one comes from the north, from the township road, and they propose a new one to the southeast direction connecting to County Road 25. They might have some conditions with that, so that will be something they will have to work out with the highway department, contingent on meeting certain specifications.
Thank you, Eric. All right, number 3. Go ahead. Number 4. Number 5. Okay, at this time, we need either comments or a motion on docket number 01.
This is Mark Clark. I would move to accept the findings of fact and approve this
Okay,
with conditions.
findings of approve or recommend the approval of the CUP permit to the county commissioners with the findings and fact and the conditions.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a
I
second?
second it. Lynn Carlson.
Lynn Carlson seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no movement, all those in favor of the motion to recommend the approval of docket 6-18-20-01 to the county board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Agreed.
The recommendation passed. Let's move on to docket number 2, which is kind of piggybang off of the same request, but it's slightly different. And so I turn the thing over to Eric again.
Good. Thank you, Chair. Again, same parcel, same petitioners, different chapters of the ordinance. Staff's review of this starts on page 47 of the packet, or the second item. And just to highlight a couple points in the staff report that are indistinguishably different compared to the previous approval, is that it's pursuant to chapter 10.4.627. And that is a section in the agricultural zoning district that says other uses similar to those listed as permitted and conditional. We do not have an individual item in our ordinance that recognizes amateur radio towers. It's not specifically listed. But with that menu of options that we have, it goes on to say that there's other towers such as wind turbines, meteorological towers, cell communication towers, radio, television, broadcasting towers. So this would be one of those categories where it's a hybrid of those two items. So those are the chapters that are referenced. In this case, the applicants wish to establish the ability to install up to 3 amateur radio towers. We've included in the staff report the 10.4.66 of the ordinance that talks about cellular communication towers and auxiliary equipment is allowed in the Ag District under a conditional use / interim use process. This project is a personal amateur radio tower. Getting into the staff report, on page 49, applicant statements as it reflects to this is that they wish to erect up to 3 amateur radio antennas up to 100 feet in height. Staff has also then included some comments as it relates to the comprehensive plan and just general statements on amateur radio service, and that it's been historically proven to be beneficial to local communities, to sometimes of being a substitute for local communication in times of natural disasters and when existing communications breakdowns and infrastructure has compromised the communication system. The setback standards that we recognize for things like this is 1.1 times the overall height. And that breakdown has been kind of listed as far as if they maximize the tower height, it's 100, say they go up to 100 feet, you'd anticipate that a setback of 110 feet then should apply from property lines or from road networks that are in the question. And we have individual, the criteria, the staff findings are different, but at this point, I guess I'll get into where the PowerPoint slides are, and that is page 62, if that could be displayed.
It's all on there, anyhow.
And again, the applicants have expressed that it would be up to. The three might vary or differ in heights. One might be 70, one might be 80, one might be 100, but they want the ability to recognize up to 100 feet. Page 63. Regards to that chapter of the ordinance, cellular communication towers and auxiliary equipment are allowed under a conditional use or interim use permit process. Again, this is a personal amateur radio tower, not a commercial endeavor. Page 64. That highlights the chapter of the ordinance that this is not a specifically itemized land use, but based on the precedent of the other items that are allowed as a conditional use or interim use, this can be approved in a similar manner. Page 65. Again, the amateur radio operators or ham operators provide services and communications, public bulletins, points of interest, especially severe weather. They provide gaps where sometimes the commercial media cannot provide. Page 66 is the aerial imagery, again showing the nature of the land. However, for the precise location of where the towers would be, probably the leading document would be page 73 of the packet. Page 73 of the packet shows the applicant's sketch in relationship to where the new house would be, and the three towers, tower 1, 2, and 3, located approximately in the middle of the new house that's proposed and the existing shed. So that would probably be the synopsis of where these would be located. Page 67 of the PowerPoint, again for evaluating setbacks. We almost assume a fall down or breakdown of that, even though they are anchored or secured. 1.1 times the tower height is the standard that we use for other towers as well, from neighboring agricultural fields, public roadways, neighboring structures. And from looking at the GIS system, they would all be in excess of 110 feet from these locations. Page 68 of the PowerPoint. Again, the Warren Township acknowledgement form has been received, and they supported the Flathers 2 requests with the caveat that the project would not restrict any adjacent agricultural practices. Signed by the chair, Everett Rolfing, May 4th, 2020. Page 69 is the consideration as an interim use permit, IUP. If a date or event determination can be identified, the permit shall be issued as an interim use permit. Proposed use is submitted in the application does not specify whether a specific event for termination exists. The applicants have not designated that possibility. Should the Planning Commission County Board consider this proposed use an interim use and finds it's more compatible being permitted as an interim, such as a permit being limited with a condition that the ownership of the property by the current owner be maintained, or if a change is, then that interim use permit would terminate. The findings for this must reflect that in accordance with Chapter 5.541 of the zoning ordinance. Page 70 of the PowerPoint is a repeat of what I just mentioned. It shall be issued as an interim use permit, a condition that the tower would be decommissioned prior to the sale of the property or within 1 year use of the towers have been discontinued. And so that concludes the staff report and presentation. And again, the staff report and the findings are different in that of the conditional use permit for a new dwelling site. Staff report with the findings starts on page 53 of your packet, with the findings of fact that are recommended starting on page 57 and 58 of the packet. So with that, I guess if there's any questions I can answer.
Is there any questions for Eric? I guess I have a couple, Eric. The first one is, do these towers have to be 200 feet apart?
No.
In other words, if they topple on one another, that's okay.
Correct.
Okay, okay. And then, I guess I don't have any more questions for you per se. I'll see if we can get Brett back for my other question. Is there any other questions for Eric from the commission?
Yeah, so I heard Eric say that there is not a specified end date. Eric, I see it looks like they're recommending an interim. Is that what your recommendation is, Eric? Is it interim, or should this be a conditional?
This should be considered, I think, by the planning commission and then ultimately the county board.
So you don't personally have a recommendation on what it should be?
I guess at this point, that's something we could probably decide as a whole, because I mean, there is different sides of that issue, and it is such that it is a structure. It could be conditioned, but I have heard information from the applicants that they prefer a conditional use permit, but there has been suggestions and advice that it be an interim use.
Suggestions and advice from where?
From legal.
Are there any other questions? Hearing, go ahead, counsel.
I have one.
Oh, Lynn, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So if legal's advising it would be an interim use sort of project, it's probably to be consistent with the other towers, the other projects we've approved.
So the reason why we are recommending it as an interim use versus a conditional use is because the interim use type projects are, the idea is for things like this, where it's a hobby type project. It's not intended to be a permanent thing. It's for an individual's purpose, what they want to do with it. Those kinds of things should be then taken down when they're no longer going to be used that way. I know there's been some discussion with a number of others about things like the cell towers, things like the solar, things like the wind farms, and whether or not those should also be interim, because they do in fact have decommissioning as part of that. And there may be some grounds for considering those as an interim use in the future. It's something we'll need to decide at some point. But anything that is going, where the plan is at some point it's going to come down, should be considered as an interim use, and then we set the event for termination as 1 year of discontinued use. So when they stop using it, then it should come down and not just stay up indefinitely.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's
Okay.
no, Steve,
Well, I would probably want to hear what the petitioner, I mean, I feel like we could be putting words in the mouth of the petitioner. If I'm going to want a conditional use permit to build anything else on my property, my intent is probably to improve my value of my property, and that that whatever I put on the property would be sold with the property. So, I mean, I'd just like to know whether the petitioner is figuring they're making an improvement that could be sold with the property, or whether they in fact intend to remove it when they're done with it.
And that's probably a question you can ask the petitioner when they do their presentation, which should be the next section.
okay, at this time, there's no further questions from the commission. What is Brett back with us? We need a presentation from you, the applicant.
Eugene, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
I
Thank
suppose
you
you
again.
should
This is
give
Brett.
your name and address again, Brett.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again, everybody. My name is Brett Flathers. Address is 24478 Almond Drive, Lewiston, Minnesota. As far as the use of this tower, I know there was some questions. I guess just I can give you guys a little bit of my background in amateur radio, so you understand that first of all. And in amateur radio, if you're not familiar, the things that were talked about before are very important for amateur radio. It is amateur. We don't do anything commercial in it. My first year in it, I was 13 years old. But I will have to say I went many years now with not being an active amateur radio operator. I do have the highest class of license that is permitted in amateur radio, which is called the Amateur Extra. So that is my license status, and it is current. We are very much into public service, and of course, if I can get these towers up, I mean, that would certainly be part of one of the things that I would be, very interested in. I think, the one thing that's been discussed just here recently, and Eric made me aware of this, I guess I didn't even know this was even something that was on the board, was this question between having the conditional use permit or being an interim. I really don't want this to be interim. He told me it sounds like the tower that was just, done last month by you guys or approved was not an interim one. He said, they put in a lot of money. They don't want to have an interim. I mean, I would say this is going to be true with me. These towers are not cheap. And I mean, I'm an individual, and yeah, my tower is not going to cost what the tower that AT&T is putting up for cellular transmission, but it's still expensive. I mean, in the realm of being an individual or a private individual. As far as why would I want it to not be that way? First of all, what if my kids take the property when I'm gone? They may want to move in here. My son does have some interest in amateur radio right now. He would like the towers up. There is, and well, I shouldn't say there is. There used to be a market for property that the amateur radio towers were already there. And other amateurs were looking for a place that had towers, and that was advertised out to the general public. So I guess that's kind of my thoughts. I think that there is value beyond my life of having the towers there. Somebody may want this property just because of the towers. And so that might, if it wasn't benefiting my children specifically, that they wanted it, it might, as far as an income thing, be good for them. So I guess with that, I'll turn to any questions that anybody might have of me.
Is there any questions of Brett from the Planning Commission? Member?
Mr. Chairman, this is Patrick. I have a couple, just clarification. Mr. Fathers, just curious here with the 3 towers. Could you shed light on why 3 towers? Is it different frequency ratings or what? I'm just curious on that number of towers. Do you care to answer
Yeah, that's
that?
a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. When I talk to the planning people, I talked about it, and I have 1 tower right now that can be put up. I believe it's like 56 feet tall. Okay, so that's going to be 1 tower. But I kind of thought, okay, what would the max that I'm going to need potentially? And you're exactly right. Why would you put up extra towers? And because amateur radio has different bands that we use, and so there's different antennas for them different bands. And in my thought of what the things that interest me, amateur radio operators are kind of on the cutting edge a lot of times in some of the research things that happen in communications, electronics, and they're all over the board of things that interest them and things that they like to do. I just know from my experience in amateur radio the things that I like and what I'm looking at doing potentially in the future. What would my needs be? And I'm kind of figuring, just like you said, well, why would we need 3? Well, these things, 3 towers would cover the things that I'm interested in. So I think that's the best answer I can give you.
Okay, I have one more for you. This in no way, and maybe the ag people can address this. That wouldn't interfere with GPS for ag issues, will it, for the GPS systems and for planning and directional, that type of thing? That should not be an issue at all?
Yeah, that shouldn't have anything to do with any GPS signals.
Okay.
You can have harmonic things that happen, and that used to happen like in towns when people had TV antennas up, and you can have harmonics that come off of different frequencies that potentially can interfere. Usually it's like the house next door type of thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
with a GPS signal, you're nowhere in that realm.
Okay,
No.
in that row. Okay, bandwidth. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I'd have a question for Brett.
Go
Can I
ahead. Yeah.
And so the interim use and conditional use permits are relatively new to Winona County, and they were originally touted as an additional tool in the toolbox for the petitioner. And it really, in my view, hasn't worked out that way. It's really become more of a way for government to regulate what you're going to get rather than what you might apply for. So my question to you specifically is, if you came before us and you had the choice between a conditional use permit or interim use permit, would you be going through this process if you knew that you weren't going to get a permanent permit? If the commission decides and the county board decides you're going to get an interim permit that's going to be revoked at a certain point in time, is this a process that you would even be going through and paying for, or is that what you want if you can't get what you're asking for, which you've made it clear you're asking for a conditional use permit?
Yeah, I put it this way. I guess it won't be a deal breaker to me. I kind of agree with it. All the things you said there. I don't know that it's necessarily fair to say, well, we're going to give a corporation this benefit, but we're not going to give an individual this benefit of thought. So just as a look of, well, what has the county been doing? And if the county's been given a conditional use permit for other towers, I mean, I guess I would like the same consideration in that.
Well, that answers my question. Thank you.
I've got a question. This is Mark Clark. What height on a tower do you need the flashing lights, the warning lights for helicopters and whatnot? Do you know what height that is? Is that in the 100-foot range, or is that below that, or?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, it's 200 feet, Mark.
200 feet?
Yeah, 200 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the only other thing, Mark, that is different on that, if you happen to be in a flight path, say you're in the flight path for an airport, then there can be further restrictions on that height. But where we're at, we're not in a flight path, and so there won't be any issue with a tower 100 foot or under.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions for the petitioner, Brett?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but I just want to say to Mr. Flathers, I would encourage you to share your expertise and knowledge, if at all possible. You seem pretty enthusiastic about this project. So any way, shape, or form that you could share that with youth and or others, I think that'd be awesome.
Well, I'll try. The more time I can, maybe as I get into retirement, I can do that. No, it's a really neat hobby, and if any of you guys are ever interested in something, like I said, it's something I want to take back up. And it went too many years of raising a family and working in my career, but I'm looking forward to it as my years move on, of getting back into it. And like I said, it's a great public service hobby too.
Oh, I applaud you for that. I really do. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Eugene.
At this time, we need a motion for public hearing on docket 02.
I'll move to open the public hearing. Commissioner Jacob.
Steve Jacob moves to open the public hearing on docket 6 dash, oh, what is the number here? Anyway, 02. Did you second it?
I will.
Okay, Lynn Carlson seconds the motion to open the public hearing. Is there any further discussion on the opening the public hearing for docket 6-18-02? Hearing none, all those in favor of opening the public hearing motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing for docket 02 is now open. Anyone wishing to speak, please get on board somehow or other and state your name and address and say what you have to say. All right, for the second time, anyone wishing to speak to docket 02, please state your name and address and say what you have to say. For the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak to docket 6-18-2002 please state your name and address and say what you have to say.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the public hearing.
Pat moves to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I second Mrs. Vince.
This is Rachel, I'll second.
Vince seconds the motion. Thank you, Vince. Is there any discussion on the motion to close the public hearing for docket 02?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to close the public hearing for docket 6-18-20-02 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion is passed and the public hearing is now closed. Okay, it's time for discussion by the Winona County Planning Commission. Anyone wishing to speak, say your piece.
Yeah, can I speak, Eugene?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm going to just start out by advocating that the petitioner has indicated that they'd like this to be a conditional use permit. It sounds to me like zoning administrator Eric Johnson it kind of said it could go either way. Legal apparently would like us to make an interim use permit. I'm concerned about the amount of rights really that were taken from petitioners who know what they want to do with their property, and I'm a little concerned about, where will it end if someone decides they're going to put in a dwelling and they decide they put in a double wide and doesn't have a basement? Are we going to say, well, that should be an interim use? I feel it's up to the petitioner to come in and ask for what they want, and this petitioner has. So I would like to see, because I see that some of the conditions and findings of fact are based on whether it's an interim or a conditional use permit. So I would like maybe to do a roll call vote on which direction we're going to move with it. Whether it will be interim use or a conditional use permit.
Mr. Chair.
This is Mark.
Council?
Mr. Chair, that's what criteria number 8 is there for. How you find on criteria number 8 determines whether the petition is a conditional use permit or an interim use permit petition. So I think you can get to it that way without doing a roll call vote from the very beginning.
Is that acceptable?
It does say on page 57 that it's listed as an interim use permit. Approve it or deny it as an interim use.
As with everything else, the findings of fact and everything in that document can be modified. So whether it's a conditional or interim use would depend on criteria 8. I will go in, and if it changes to conditional, then it will be revised throughout to include conditional rather than interim.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other discussion on anything pertaining to this application prior to going to the findings of fact? Lynn?
Just for clarification, I understand Stephanie was saying that a big difference between the two is one, the interim use, it needs to be removed from the property, and for a conditional use permit, it has no time frame. I mean, it doesn't it go with the property too? One goes with the owner, one goes with the property, or something between the two?
The difference is timeline. The only difference between a conditional use permit and an interim use permit is whether or not there's a deadline or a time period in which it would exist. In this case, and based on what the petitioner was saying about wanting to resell the property, one alternative to still have it as an interim use permit but make it saleable would be to just have it strictly be event for termination upon discontinued use for 1 year. So if they stop using it, it should come down, at which point the permit would be gone. But if it continues to be in use, whether it's by this petitioner or others, then it would continue to be a valid permit. But the difference between that and a conditional use permit is that a conditional use permit would allow it to be there indefinitely, whether it was being used or not. And it would, if they took it down in 50 years, somebody else could build a new one in the same spot under the same terms of the conditional use permit, because the conditional use permit runs with the land.
Okay, so nothing really is permanent. I mean, if you think of a geologic timescale, nothing is permanent. So AT&T, what we approved last month, once they stop using it, it can just sit there? Is that basically what we decided?
That is, yes. And things of that nature can be considered as interim use permits.
Well, I would like to say that it's my belief that many people, when they make an investment in their property, whether it's a home, a barn, a grain bin, a feedlot, a cell tower, a ham radio tower, they're putting that on their property and assuming that they're increasing the value of their property and that it could be sold with the property. And I don't really see the distinction between the ham towers and a dwelling. I mean, just like Lynn said, in the greater scheme of things, nothing is forever. But this person's willing to make an investment into our economy and into our infrastructure and into our safety. And I feel they deserve the security of that. They can sell that. They've upgraded their property, and they can, and if it sits for 5 years, so be it. I mean, maybe he just is busy for 5 years but doesn't want it taken down, and then he decides he wants to help his next generation into it. I don't feel like we should have to take his asset away from him the minute it's going to be a significant expense to put those towers up. And if it were me, I would feel like I want to make the investment and I want it there, and it's infrastructure.
Gene Hansen, Chairman. At this point, I would like to remind the Planning Commission that we just had to redo a conditional use permit for a windmill where there already had been a conditional use permit. But one of the reasons that the 2 failed windmills that were there were not torn down, other than legal points, was because this was a conditional use permit, which at the time that was applied for, that's all we had. But it is my opinion that if we went to all the trouble to do interim use permits and make it part of our zoning ordinance, and we don't allow us to take and actually use an interim use permit, it's just another example of wasting the commission's and commissioners' time and energy to put that piece in our toolbox. And I personally do not have any problem with saying that if this tower was not used for a year, that it should be taken down. You can change the time too, I presume, but we got enough eyesores sitting around this county, including houses, that supposedly the Planning Commission was granted the owner of the property a permit to build a new house that's still sitting there several years after that permit was. So, yeah, whether we like it or not, government is going to interfere with us as long as we keep holding our hand out for money. So we better get used to it. But we don't have to complicate the process and make it impossible to get rid of these obsolete structures.
Okay. So if I understand you correctly, Eugene, a big part of the interim permit, the larger scope, is to protect natural resources. We're actually thinking about the earth and not junking it up with garbage being left behind. So why did we give AT&T a conditional use permit? Are they going to do this forever? Is that cell tower going to be in business forever? I feel like we made a big mistake if we gave AT&T a conditional use permit. The interim use permit, it makes sense. And even for the current petitioner, who's going to know if he doesn't use his radio towers every month? Who's going to know if he has a 6-month gap, if a year goes by and it's not in service? I don't think anyone's going to be following it to say, okay, now it's got to come down because you went abroad for a year to Europe and you didn't use it. But we need to be consistent, because I understand his argument too. I mean, why did we give a conditional use permit to AT&T, who's going to have a big honking tower? It's not going to last forever. And then we argue that you know, his is going to have a time limit.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I feel like we're scaring people away from doing business in our county. If they can't come in make an investment in what they would consider to be infrastructure or something useful on their property and have it be an upgrade to their property, why wouldn't they just go to the neighboring county and say, once I make this investment, I'm going to be able to resell it and I'm not going to have to tear it down. You know, if it was your barn, Eugene, and you use it for a year, you'd expect that you could still have it there and that somebody could come along later and use it. It's a big investment. So I won't go any farther.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
as before,
This is Mike.
you can remove the condition regarding sale and just leave it as discontinued use, and then there would be no impact on being able to sell property with an improvement to it.
all right. Somebody else,
Yay!
someone else wanted to make a comment?
I like Stephanie's idea.
Yeah, this is Mike Flynn.
Yeah. Mike, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Steve Jacobs. I think it's an investment. If I was going to do an investment in my property, I want to know that I have somewhere to go with it. And just to say that it has no value when I discontinue the service, I think is wrong. And I think the points of the last cell tower being a conditional use is valid. And I think just because we have this interim in our back pocket doesn't mean we have to plug everything into it. So I'm against the interim and going with the conditional use. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, if nobody else has any additional comments, let's begin with the findings of fact. What page are we on here? It's on my screen, but I don't know what page it is.
58,
58. All right.
58.
Okay. All right. Same rules as before. I'll start with number 1. If anybody has anything, jump right in. If not, we'll go to 2. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. This is particularly the same as the last permit application. It's on land. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is the one that we have the contention on. Okay, is anyone have any additional comments on number 8?
Yes, this is Mark Clark.
Go ahead.
Because the petitioner asked that it be a conditional use permit, I think we should change it from interim use to conditional use.
Do you make that a motion?
I make that a motion.
Is there a second?
I second that. Mike Flynn seconds that.
Mark Clark has made a motion to change findings of fact number 8 to conditional use instead of interim use. And Michael Flynn seconds it. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
How would you like the finding then to be modified? Would it be the use is not a temporary use or does not have an identifiable date or both?
I guess, Mark, have you got any comments? You made the motion.
I would say it's a temporary use, but does not have an identifiable date or event for termination.
Council, does that satisfy you?
It does. I was just asking, needed the clarification for what they were looking to change.
Is that okay with the second?
Michael, is that okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Now
I
you
agree.
broke up. You broke. Say that again, Michael.
I agree. Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you.
I
all right.
agree with Mark.
Is there any other discussion on this motion? Hearing none. I believe at first we'll just do a voice or whatever you want to call it under these circumstances vote. The motion is to change findings of fact number 8. The use is a temporary use and does not have an identifiable date or event for termination, so it's a conditional use permit. That's right, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the motion is passed.
Mr. Chair, we also then need to modify the basis for that finding. So what's in the italics needs to be changed. So I'm looking for some guidance as to what you would like included.
Now, who's supposed to come up with the guidance?
That would be you guys. You're
You're
responsible for making the finding and for providing the support for it. So if you tell me what you want in there as far as support goes, I can craft the language, but I need to know what you want to be factored in.
All right, Mark, you made the motion.
Okay.
You have the
Ready?
floor.
The amateur radio station operated by the petitioners and the towers needed for that activity is temporary in nature and would not cease upon the sale of the property by the petitioner or when use or period. Does that work for you?
It does, but it's essentially restating the finding, which we need a because. So basically what you need to do is take the use as a temporary use and does not have an identifiable date or event for termination because, and that because is what we use for the italics.
Because he may sell the property to someone who will use it as what it's used for, that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How's that?
Perfect.
Works for me.
Is that enough, council?
It is.
Works.
Okay. All right, is there any other discussion on anything in the findings of fact? Let's move on to the following conditions. Number 1,
We just skipped the whole part that says it's interim. Is that going to be
I will
deleted?
I'll go in and change the interim to conditional after we take a look at the
Okay,
condition.
sorry to interrupt.
okay, that's okay, Lynn?
Yes, sorry.
All right, that's fine. All right, number 1 again. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Okay, at this point,
Number
do we have a
1,
motion to
Should I
make a
assume
recommendation?
Should I
Number
assume
1.
that number 4 should be struck as a result of the finding on number 8?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
yes.
Number 1 shouldn't say interim.
And number
Number
1
1.
says interim.
If you have it on your computer, I'm changing all of the interim to conditional. I
Okay.
have the revised
I see
version
it.
of it.
I
So,
see it.
and then strike. Are we striking criteria or condition number 4 as well?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody clear now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, now we need a motion to recommend to the county board or not recommend to the county board? What's your desire?
I move we recommend approval of this petition
As amended
as amended.
with the findings of fact and the
Findings of
condition.
fact and the conditions as amended.
I will second it.
Mark seconds it. And for the record, and Lynn made the motion. Is there any other discussion on this motion? Seeing no movement, all those in favor of the motion to recommend the approval of the CUP for the amateur radio towers as amended, say aye.
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 I
Opposed, nay. It is recommended, or it is, well, whatever the right wording is. All right, let's go to number 3. Oh, which page is that?
Page 79, Gene.
Oh, all I got is on my
Hi,
screen.
everybody. This is Lou.
All right, we're on to number 3,
There we go.
6-18-20-03. Go ahead, Lou.
Can you hear me, Eugene?
Yes, I can.
All right, great. I'm going to try to share my screen here quick. So hold on just a second.
I can even see you, Lou.
Oh, awesome. Hi, Eugene. I can see you too. I need the host to disable or re-enable participant screen sharing. I think,
Done.
got it? Thank you. Okay, just give me a second here.
Otherwise, I can put it up, Lou, if you want. Either way, it's easier if you control it.
Oh, here it is. Okay,
Okay, all systems are go, Lou.
can we see that?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes.
All right. Just have a quick PowerPoint here to summarize the petition of James and Sherry Heim. They are asking for a conditional use permit to allow a new single-family dwelling on less than 40 acres. The request is pursuant to Chapter 10.4.6, 36 of the Winona County zoning ordinance. The parcel of land is an approximately 8-acre parcel with an existing dwelling on it. And they want to split that into a 3-acre parcel and a 5-acre parcel. The 3-acre parcel would be for the existing dwelling, and the 5-acre parcel will be for the proposed new dwelling. The stated goal of the petitioner is to allow their daughter and son-in-law to move in and into the existing home while they will build a new home next door. There are, healthcare and property management issues that would this would benefit, but they did not want to go for the temporary dwelling for those purposes. They were more interested in creating a new dwelling site that then could be at a future date sold and bought to a third party. So that is why they are in the situation of going through a conditional use permit and not a interim use permit for a temporary dwelling. See the access, the last bullet here, the access is proposed to be shared. and an easement would need to be created for that purpose. They would also be sharing the well on the property. Easement would also need to be created for the well sharing that would occur. Here's the site overview. The location is just above Elba, to the south of Elba, in Elba Township, Section 21. Just on top of the ridge before County Road 39 dips down into the valley. Here we have a little bit closer aerial photo with the site plan with the proposed splits through the middle here. You can see the existing well. The proposed new dwelling, actually there is a shed there right now, and they want to convert that shed and then add on to it. So I don't know exactly how they're going to accomplish that. It really doesn't matter to us whether they use the existing shed or not, or if they want to tear it down and build a new stick-built dwelling. Either way is fine, but they had stated that they would be using at least part of the structure of the existing shed and then adding on to it. The petitioners attended the Elba Township board meeting, and the township board indicated support for the request, signed the acknowledgement form, and that was part of the application packet. We have not received any other comments, as far as I know, as I'm aware of, from neighbors or any other members of the public. And that's really all that I have for our presentation at this point. We would stand behind our findings and the staff analysis for the criteria, which and we were able to find positive findings for each one. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Eugene, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Does any member of the Planning Commission have a question for Lou? Thank you, Lou. At this time, is there anyone in on our conversation, or whatever we want to call this, that wishes to speak on behalf of the petitioner? Okay, is there any indication on your screen or that someone wishes to speak to this petition?
Hi, this is Jim Heim, 19485 County Road 39, St. Charles. Hey, if anybody's got any questions I could answer.
Okay, does anybody in the commission have any questions for James Heim? I guess not, James. Thank you for joining us, and we will proceed.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we need a motion to open a public hearing on 6-18-20-03.
I move. Lynn Carlson moves. Open public hearing.
Lynn Carlson moves to open the public
Rachel
hearing on
Paul,
03. We need a second.
Rachel second.
Rachel has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of opening the public hearing for 6-18-20-03, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion to open the public hearing is passed. All those wishing to speak to docket 03, please get online or whatever we do here and state your name and address and say your piece. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to docket 03, please state your name and address and say what you intend to say. For the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak to docket 6-18-20-03, please state your name and address and speak your piece.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the public comment period. Patrick?
Patrick moves to close the public hearing.
Mark seconds it.
Mark seconds it. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of closing the public hearing say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or comments from the Winona County Planning Commission members? I don't hear much, so at this time, can we go to the findings of fact?
I'm going to just go ahead and make a motion to approve the petition with the findings of fact as they're presented.
Including the conditions?
Yes, and including the conditions as presented.
Second.
Mark seconds the motion?
Patrick.
Or Patrick, excuse me. I have a hard time distinguishing the voices sometimes. All right, is there any discussion on the motion to approve the recommendation to the county commissioners for docket 03 with the findings of fact as presented and the conditions as presented? Hearing nothing. All those in favor of the motion to recommend the approval of the CUP application on 6-18-20-03 say aye.
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 Okay, I think we got everybody. Those opposed say nay. The motion to recommend the approval of the CUP application -03 is passed. Okay, at this time, we need updates from the Board of Adjustment. So, Rachel, do you have anything from the Board of Adjustment, or did you meet?
We did met today, and we had 2 petitions. One was a variance to allow a building site to class 2 and class 3 soil types, and there were no public. We approved it unanimously, and with all the staff findings and conditions that staff were. And the second one was in Dresden on Riverview Drive. And they had a bunch of things that were not.
I lost the audio of Rachel.
So did I.
Can we get some technical support here?
Mr. Chair, Rachel should maybe jump back in if she can. The part that she was at was where there was a series in Dresbeck Township of reduced setbacks in order to accomplish an upgraded septic system, which also passed.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Long time coming.
Good.
Does everybody on the commission understand what she said on the two topics?
I
got it.
All
right.
Could Kay cover the first one again? Make sure I heard it correctly, please.
Yeah, it sounded like she was pretty far down the well, didn't it, Mark?
Yes, it did.
Kay, would you please intercede again?
Yes, just give me a second here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Guys, can you hear me? I'm back, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Rachel, you're way down the well. Can you let Kay speak on your behalf? Is that okay?
You're coming through garbled.
It's fine. Sorry, I got bad reception here at my house.
Would it be okay if Kay said what you wanted to say or were supposed to say?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Go ahead, Kay.
So, Jason and Alicia Elsing petition was the first one. It was a building site to be established on class 2 and 3 soils instead of class 4. And it was to produce a building site so that they could increase the efficiency of their farming operation. It was one of Lou's petitions. Lou might still be on as well, but and it was to reduce their commuting time in order to put more time and energy into their farming operation by living closer. And it passed.
Okay, now did everybody hear both parts of Rachel's Board of Adjustment update?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't technology great?
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, it's Steve's turn. County Board.
Yeah, the county board, the 300-foot cell tower, the Dave and Joyce Myers IUP, and the CUP for the fitness center. Everything's been approved, so there wasn't any. It all went through on consent business. There wasn't any discussions on it.
So,
Okay.
Steve, did the Homer Township send in their approval form too then for the Apraxia?
We had everything we needed to approve them.
Good.
Okay, any further questions for Steve from the County Board? Okay, at this time, Kay, would you kind of give us a tentative overview for what might happen at next month's meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Because of the complications in the boardroom with this larger group, and of course Kelly being gone tonight, swells the ranks normally as well. And with 1 to 3 staff members or 1 to 4 staff members, we cannot very easily accommodate the group in the county boardroom. So one of the options was possibly maybe Wilson or the city of Winona boardroom. And so we're not 100% sure we're going to have any petitions for July, so we would be striking for August. We'll know tomorrow and we'll send out an update. Eric and Lou will be seeing what else comes in. We believe Board of Adjustment has got at least one, but we always wait till Friday to determine that. So, and if we need to do this one, 1 more month or so, it just depends on where we can find a space that's that we're able to also tape and allow those with underlying health conditions to join remotely, which is just what the county board is doing as well.
Okay, does the commission understand what Kay is up against, or do they have questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Kay. I guess at this time I would ask for a motion to adjourn, if so desired.
So move.
Patrick moved?
Correct.
Okay, a second?
I second. This is Vince.
Vince seconds the motion to adjourn. All those in favor of adjourning the June 18th, 2020 Winona County Planning Commission meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you all for attending, if not in person, at least in spirit.